All right, mathletes, let's look at this problem. So we have hurricane damage. So in August and September 2005, Hurricanes Katrina and Rita caused extraordinary flooding in New Orleans. Many homes were severely damaged and destroyed, and of those that survived, many required extensive cleaning. It was thought that cleaning flood damaged homes might present health hazard due to the large amounts of mold present in many of the homes. And a sample of 370 residents of Orleans Parish who had participated in the cleaning of one or more homes, 65 of them had experienced symptoms of wheezing. And in the sample of 173 residents who had not participated in cleaning, 22 of them had wheezing problems. So we're looking to see if we can conclude that the proportion of residents with wheezing symptoms is greater among those who participated in cleaning of flood damaged homes. So we're going to say that P1 is going to denote the proportion of residents with wheezing symptoms who had cleaned the flood damaged homes, and P2 are going to be those folks that have the wheezing symptoms that did not clean. And here we're going to use the alpha level of 0.10. All right. So before we jump into writing our null hypothesis and our alternate hypothesis, I created a little table here, and I want you to use this table to kind of help you out. So here I just titled, those that cleaned and those that did not clean. All right, so let's go ahead and fill out this table together. So from those that cleaned, as we read, from those that cleaned who participated in cleaning, in a sample of 370, so that's our N, 370. So of those, it told us that 65 of them had wheezing problems. And of those who had did not participate in cleaning, so there's a total of 173 that did not participate in the cleaning, 173. Of that group, we had 22 people that had wheezing problems. All right. And if we recall from P hat, P sub 1 hat, and P sub 2 hat, here we calculated this by just simply taking our x and dividing it by n. So if you want to write that formula, x over n, just as a little reminder, let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to take out my calculator. I'll divide that with you. So 65 divided by 370. Let me do that again. 65 divided by 370. For this sake, I'm going to round. I'm going to say about 0.176. All right, and then I'm going to take the 22 and I'm going to divide it by 173. And I'll say that's about 0.127. So there's my P sub 1 hat and P sub 2 hat. All right, so now for the important part of the business. So let me go ahead and shrink all this. Actually, let me undo that sizing. All right, so I'll just write it right here. All right, so H naught and H1. So our null hypothesis, and we're always going to go back, to our claim. So our claim is, or can you conclude, right? This is what we're trying to conclude. Can you conclude that the proportion of residents with wheezing problems is greater amongst those who participated in the cleaning? So we're saying that this group had a higher percentage, right? A higher proportion of wheezing problems than this group that did not clean. All right, so for H naught, remember you have to figure out what are you testing here. So we're testing proportions, and we're saying the proportion of the first group for our null hypothesis is no different than the proportion of people who had wheezing problems from that second group. We're saying there is no difference. But for our alternate hypothesis, right, what we're trying to conclude is that group that cleaned, we're going to say they had a greater proportion of wheezing problems compared to those that did not clean. So this first step, in my opinion, is the most important. And here we could see we have a right-tailed. All right, and we would use that right tail if you're going to use that critical value approach. All right, well, I'm not going to use a critical value approach here, but just to kind of set the scenes, because you will have to do it on your test. So on the homework, most people choose not to, which is fine. But this is going to be a right-tailed, so it's going to be right tail, everything shaded to the right of that tail, and this area is going to be 0.10. So when we're finding our critical value, right, and again, I'm not going to do this, but just to kind of set you up here, when we're finding the critical value, and we're using proportions here, you're going to use inverse norm as your calculator function. All right, but again, we're lucky here that we don't have to do that because we're going to use a p-value approach. So going back to our p-value approach, all right, let me go ahead and copy this and set up a new page. All right, so here you could see that because we're dealing with proportions in this problem, right? We're testing proportions, and in particular, we have two proportions that we're testing, right? Two groups. So that's why when I go to stat test, I'm going to use two prop z-test because we're conducting the test and we have two proportions that we're comparing. So it makes sense to use this program. So again, you go to stats, go over to test, and then go down to two prop z-test. And this is where our laying out everything is going to come in handy, because now when I use that program, I just enter in all those values. Okay, so now when you go ahead and you hit calculate, what we're interested, because we're doing the p-value approach, all right, we're using the p-value approach, we are interested in our p-value, of course. So in this case, we end up with p equals 0.076 if I round. So remember, we're always comparing p and alpha. So in this case, our p-value is 0.076, and our alpha that we're using is 0.10. So 0.10 is greater than 0.076. So p is less than alpha. So if we recall, when p is less than alpha, that's telling us to reject H naught. So we reject H naught. So I'm going to go over here to my H naught and I'm going to reject it. So I go and I say, okay, what the heck does this mean now? Right here. Well, here we're saying that there is a difference in proportions, right? That in particular, those residents that cleaned the houses, right, the flood damaged homes, they had a higher percentage, right? A bigger proportion of them had wheezing problems than those folks that did not clean homes. So we have sufficient evidence to conclude, right, that the proportion of residents with wheezing symptoms, were from the group of those folks that cleaned the homes. All right, so that's what we're going to be doing in this chapter. All right, so all this is very similar to what we've done in the past. All right, so hopefully that helps, and we'll go ahead and we'll try a practice problem in class.